this first one. Hi, Shannon and Dr. Doreen. Thank you so much for a great show. I'm a parent of a 9-year-old girl who was diagnosed with autism when she was 3. I'm currently doing my master's in applied behavior analysis. Rock that. I want to ask you if it will be possible to accrue experience hours working with my daughter and under the supervision of a BCBA. Your feedback will be greatly appreciated. We're having more and more parents writing in and saying, if I'm going to spend the time to learn everything that I need to learn to help my child, I want it to count for more than that, as if that's not enough, because it is, but I want to be useful to other families and I want to have a career in this field. Sometimes they want to do that, the registered behavior technician. Sometimes they want to become a BCBA. So here's a great question. You have to get a bunch of hours to be a BCBA. Can you do it working with your own child?
Yeah, as far as I know, you can. You would think, I think if it was, I went through psychology licensure before the BCBA, and it's so much more strict in regards to things like this. This would be considered in psychology a conflict of interest, but as far as the BACB, the Behavior Analysis Certification Board, is concerned, I don't think they mind that you receive hours working with your own child. I'm pretty sure that's true, but to be able to accurately answer this parent's questions, I would suggest that you contact IBT, Institute for Behavioral Training, our training organization, and Cecilia knows all these things because they're constantly training people and mentoring. At CARD, we have a whole mentorship program for our own staff, and so and for outside people as well. We can provide the mentorship and supervision, and I'm pretty sure that you're allowed to use your own child as well for this. And of course, it's great because you gain a lot of insight and experience. It's a little bit harder, I think, because we all are emotionally much more involved with our own kids. But I think that it's fine to do. I'm saying this because just a few weeks ago, I think on this show, we were talking about the RBT for parents. And I did take that idea back upstairs and presented it, and now we're going to be putting together a training for RBT for all parents, so that'll be kind of cool. Yeah, absolutely love that. That's so exciting to me. And I had said this probably a year ago for some parents who were interested in being BCBAs as well, and it's something like 1,500 hours that you have to, isn't it? It's like a crazy BCBA is, yes. Yeah, crazy number of hours that you have to get the BCBA. Right. And I was saying at some point we're going to see parents who are going to start switching. So because at a certain point, I would imagine it's great to have somebody else working with your child. So I can see two moms saying, I'll work with your child if you work with my child. That's a great idea. Yeah. And in that way, you get all your hours. Your child gets, all those hours. Really could be incredible. That's a very good idea. I love it when parents get excited about doing these things. I know, it's amazing. We actually have a number of parents who have gone through it with their own child and then have gone and, it is a pretty major thing, gotten their master's degree and their board certification, and which involves not just the 1,500 hours, but examination and so on, and ongoing continuing ed. And they are fabulous providers. Yeah. Thea Davis is one of them, for instance. She's an amazing provider. Yeah, remarkable. So, really incredible and exciting to me because Nancy Alspaugh-Jackson, who's going to be with us in the next hour for Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy, we always talk about as parents that, there is a grief that comes when your child is diagnosed with autism. Right. But for a lot of us, Nancy calls it the kitchen floor club, that at some point you're on the kitchen floor and saying, I don't know what to do. And that you pray to whatever, the God of your understanding or whatever, the universe, whatever you believe in, and say, help me to help my child, and then I will help whoever I can. Right. And that a lot of people find a second calling, and in different ways, in different ways in the field of autism. So here is a great way to find that second calling. It's useful to your child and useful to so many, and it's a new career for you. And it's productive, and I think it's important when we get scared or anxious and depressed and fearful of life that we actually start doing something productive that helps other people, because it takes you away from your own problems.
I couldn't agree more. I said to a friend on this morning, she said to me, I'm just feeling bummed and I just want somebody to talk to. Have you got a minute? I said, oh, I would love nothing better than to listen to what you have going on, because nothing could take me further away from what's on my mind.
Exactly.
And I said, please share with me.
Yeah.
Love it. Okay, we've had some questions about chromosome 16 duplication. Two different questions. If you have chromosome 16 duplication, does that mean you have autism? And a second one, what does duplication of chromosome 16 mean?
It's funny that we would have separate questions on this, but so, you know, any kind of duplication of a chromosome is essential. So the chromosomes, I don't know how far into detail I should go, but we're talking about our genetic DNA essentially, and when you have duplication on a chromosome, it will generally lead to developmental disability of some type. The answer to the first question, no, autism is not yet defined in a objective way like that. It would be good if it was. It's not. It's defined in a very subjective way. It's based on a series of symptoms that present themselves behaviorally. So it's very possible, it's entirely possible that some of the kids who have a diagnosis of autism based on their symptoms could potentially also have duplication of chromosome 16 or duplication of some other chromosome, because any duplication will generally has a higher probability of leading to some delays.
Okay.
And those delays could potentially look like autism. We just don't know.
But you don't necessarily have autism if you have a duplication.
Absolutely, right.
Okay.
Not at all. So there's many other disorders that are not autism that are due to some duplication of a chromosome. It would be, I've always thought about this, and I've always wondered, why are we not, like, you know, of course this was part of the accrue cause as well, which was the genetic research that is currently underway as well, always. And that's what they're trying to do. Autism Speaks now owns accrue, and what they're trying to do is, of course, gather as much genetic information as possible, because it's very likely that the overall spectrum of autism has, you know, we believe it has multiple phenotypes. Yeah. Some of those phenotypes could be defined genetically. Yeah. So it's possible that we should be really looking at every child and getting their genetic composition as well. We really, really should. Yeah. And that would then allow us to see what percentage of kids with the diagnosis of autism have, pure, let's say, chromosome 16 duplication or some other duplication or some other chromosomal issue. But it does not necessitate that if you have chromosome 16 duplication that you would have autism. Again, with any kind of duplication, there's a higher likelihood that you will have some delays, but not necessarily the case.
Okay, great answer to a very complicated subject, but thank you for asking, for both people who are asking those questions. We're going to take a short break, and then when we come back, we've got some more questions for Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh, and you can be writing your questions in right now on the live feature. Stick with us. Welcome back to Autism Live. Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is here with us. She is an amazing expert in the field of autism. This is just a wonderful treat to have her here answering all of our questions. Moving on to the next question. Good morning. How do I start teaching my 5-year-old beginning conversation skills? Right now, he's just echoing me when I ask, how are you? And thanks for your help.
Oh, it's a pleasure. We're glad to help. It's too complex a question for me to just tell you specifically how to go from one step to another, because, really, there's just beginning conversation, and it's people always ask me these questions, and I tell them there's about, I don't know, maybe 50 things you have to teach in order for conversation to occur. So I'll just go through a quick sort of some of the things that you teach. When you start with a child, obviously you're just teaching a series of labels, and then after you've figured out labels, just, nouns. then you have to teach verbs, actions, and then you have to teach past tense and future tense. And meanwhile, all of this has to be integrated. And then you have to, so you're building sentences as well. Mm-hmm. And then you have to, of course, teach adjectives, descriptors, and bring those into the statement as well. And then you have to teach pronouns, and you have to teach prepositions. And when I say adjectives or descriptors, there's a million different descriptors, obviously. And then once you have all the basic structure of language or speech in place, then you have to teach peripheral things, such as taking turns. Yeah. So these are each individual thing that I'm mentioning is a lesson in skills. And then you have to, of course, teach exchange, so dialogue, so questions, and how you can answer questions, how your intonation changes with questions versus statements, taking turns with another person versus in a group, and then, being able to actually listen to the information of the person that's talking to you and then modify your content. That's more working memory type stuff. And then, of course, you have to do all the things that go into actual conversation. So how do I join the conversation of two other people versus a group of people? How do I repair a conversation, let's say, which then brings in the whole concept of how do I read their facial expressions and body language to tell whether they're interested or losing interest? And if they are losing interest and walking away, how do I repair it now? Then it brings in also self-monitoring. So have I been talking about the same subject for a long time, or have I been going on too long about this? And then, so there's repair, exchange, initiation, ending appropriately, conversing in the appropriate setting. So, you tend to change your conversation completely when it's a social setting versus a more like academic setting or formal setting. There's a billion things, right? I mean, I just mentioned a few.
And it all sounds overwhelming.
And that's my tired brain. So if you realize that a lot goes into conversation, social conversation, and then not to mention content, right? So like knowing the appropriate social content. So you then realize that you do need a much more comprehensive and detailed curriculum. And that's why we developed skills. And so for this parent, my suggestion would be really to go on skillsforautism.com, skillsforautism.com, and that's where you're going to find this information. Conversation itself as a lesson, I believe, is I'm thinking it's in the social curriculum. It could be in the language curriculum. I don't remember now. But
I think there are parts of it in each.
Maybe there's parts in each. But what you need to do is do it right. And don't just select little things here and there. This is what often happens, I think, with other providers, is that they will just select a concept and teach it to the child and assume that the child will now get everything else. And it's not enough to just teach a child to memorize a conversation. That's not the point. The point is you have to teach the child everything they know in order to bring it together. So really, if you answer the questions in skills, the assessment or the index, you'll see everything your child needs to learn, everything. And then you go just through the program, and skills will tell you when various things your child becomes eligible. So we won't let you teach things that are too early, too young, that sort of thing. And then you bring it together that way, and you produce enough of a repertoire of basic skills that your child can actually engage in conversation.
And I have to say, from a parent who watched my child go through this, I had Card in my home working through exactly those lessons, the same exact thing that's in skills that you have access to. And I remember standing on the sidelines and watching on the video baby monitor and thinking, what are we doing?
Right.
I want my child to be speaking, and I want him to be able to converse. And they were teaching him, we had flashcards, and they were, this is a bird. A bird is an animal. And they were teaching a bird has wings, all these different things. And I kept thinking, when is it all going to gel? When is it all going to come together?
Right.
And on the day that I saw it gel and come together, it was like the heavens opened up and I could hear the angels sing. But it was a good, and he flew through those lessons. It was a good, I want to say 6 to 7 months to get through all that foundation.
Absolutely.
And it required so much patience on my part, and I had to monitor who I let be in my head during that time. My mother came and visited, and she was like, honey, I think this is a waste of time. And I said, I assure you it's not.
Right.
Right? But I didn't know for sure.
I know.
And then I saw it and I knew for sure.
I know. You're so right. This is such a valid point. I was just talking to one of our dear friends in South Africa, and she was saying the same thing. It's so hard for parents, I think, because you just want it to happen yesterday.
Yes.
And there is a ton of repetition that goes into ABA. And not only that, there's, I literally just named maybe 15, 20 programs, and that's just kind of what came out of my head.
Right.
And there's 400 or 500 programs. So you take 6 months to teach 5 different things, and then you bring them into one. Then you take another 6 months to teach 10 other things, and you bring them into one, and then join them with the first one. And it's a continuous building process like that. So it's very hard for parents. I totally get it.
But it's important to know that that's the path. If where you want to get is to the conversation, you have to follow the path. And when, as a parent, I want to take shortcuts.
Right.
Shortcuts don't get you there.
They don't. And if you think about this, we're trying to do what God did with us. I mean, I hate to say it that way, but I often think of this. It's like one of the things we teach very early on is matching. A lot of people say, why do you do matching? Like, what's the purpose of matching? And if you think about it, matching is a very interesting skill because first what you're doing is there's many different components to why we teach matching, aside from the fact that it's the most basic of compliance skills. So just please do what I'm asking you to do. But then you start with identical matching, which then also allows me to see if the child is seeing things the same way we are and hearing things. And that brings in the whole concept of receiving information auditorily and then producing it visually. So that's an important skill that your child has to have. But once they've done identical matching, and then we go to like similar matching, and then eventually categories and sorting, the whole concept of categories and sorting is extremely important because that's where you start to develop organization in your brain, in your mind. So if I taught you, let's say, 1,000 labels and I didn't categorize them somehow, you'd have a very, very hard time retrieving information going forward. But the fact that I categorize things, and so, let's say I'll teach you that this is a pad of paper, but I will also categorize this pad of paper in a number of different ways. I'll categorize it as a yellow object. I'll categorize it as something that's rectangular, something that's made of paper, for instance, right? Or something that you can write on. And those are all different lessons that I just mentioned. So that in the future, if I ask, name some things that are rectangular, this actually will come to mind because it was taught that way. Or if I say, name a few things that are yellow, it might come to mind. So the categorization of stuff then becomes extremely important in future retrieval. And that's everything is like that, Shannon. So everything we teach in multiple ways because we want the child to be able to retrieve it later on. Yeah. That's why it takes so long.
But it's amazing and it's worthwhile. And I see that I see the paycheck for that every day with my child and the things that he understands and the things that he gets and the way that I'm able to converse with him. I always say in the beginning when he was diagnosed, I wanted to know if I was ever going to be able to, I'm going to cry, but I wanted to know if I was going to be able to have a conversation with him about the big stuff, about concepts. And, why are we here on this planet? Was that ever going to, and we have those conversations now. And I know that we do because we took the time
to do all this,
to do all those steps and to do it right.
You also have a very deep child who now also analyzes you.
Yes.
Which I love.
And thank goodness for that, because heaven knows I need some analysis, right? Yeah, he's remarkable. But, those were the things we wanted, and we followed the steps. So we encourage you, check out Skills, take a look.
That'll help the most.
And by the way, you can have your ABA provider use Skills with your child.
Absolutely.
There are lots of ABA providers that are not card that are using Skills.
Oh, yeah.
So if you have a good ABA provider and you like working with them, but you see that there are some things that you're missing, ask them to use Skills with your child. The curriculum is all there for you. We've told you before that you can get a 14-day free trial for Skills. Go to skillsforautism.com. There are two different ways that you can do that, one with a credit card, one without, that you can still do a 14-day free trial. You don't get access to everything, but you get access to enough that you really get a feel for what it is. Now, somebody had written into us last week and said, we talk about Skills and how great it is. They want to know if there is a cost. Yes, after that 14 days, there is a cost. It depends on how many children you register, what it costs. But I also want you to know that there are potential grants that are available for Skills. You can register for those at ACT Today. That's act-today.org. They have given away scholarships for Skills. So if it's a thing where you cannot afford it, it's very cost effective. Let's start out by saying that. But if it is beyond your means right now, don't let that stop you. Apply for a grant from ACT Today. I heard from Nancy, they love to give grants for Skills because they know that people are going to use it.
Right. And I'm not even sure right now what the rate is, but I think if you're an individual user, it's $75 a month, which really, if you think about it, it comes to about $900 a year. And you would be shocked at what you get for $900 a year.
Oh.
I mean, it's so complex. There's so many things in there. Not only is there an assessment tool, there's a massive curriculum in every possible lesson you'd ever want to teach your child. IEP goals, treatment tracking. It allows you to track your medications and your diets with ABA together. There's a BIP builder that helps you build a behavior intervention plan. There's a functional assessment there is everything you possibly, and I really recommend you get on there now because we're just about to add materials as well so that you can download and print your own stimulus cards. And there's a lot of stuff that's very, very useful. And another thing is that you can also ask your funding agency to fund it. We had Magellan, I will say, a fabulous managed healthcare company, purchased 5,000 licenses for all of their providers so that they have a lot of families receiving this now.
Wonderful.
So this is what I'm saying. Is if you push it, I think that your funding agency will be interested in purchasing it. It allows the funding agencies to have, and of course for them it's even cheaper because they buy in bulk.
Right.
But the main thing for them is that it allows them to actually see the child's progress and to help the provider then is going down a route that's very valid.
Absolutely. And we should mention, too, there are some schools who are using it, too. You can check with your child's
school districts, yeah.
And it may be that your child's school is participating. There might even be a skills account associated with your child. You can ask them if there already is.
Right.
Really remarkable. I can tell you that if you're going to an IEP and you want to hire an advocate to look at your IEP and to go with you to recommend goals, it's going to cost you $900 for that one meeting.
Right.
And you can get all of that from Skills.
Right.
So it's truly, truly amazing. All right, let's take another short break, and then we're going to come back with some questions that kind of go hand in hand with what we talked about, because sometimes as a parent you get frustrated with what's happening, where are we, where we're going to get to, and we have a question about that. But first, let's take a break, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Autism Live and to Ask Dr. Doreen. We have with us Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh, and she's answering our questions, and it's a wonderful thing. So thrilled to have you here. I want to push on with some more questions.
Sure.
We've got a question. My son is 3.5. He started with cards 6 months ago, 40 hours. We started potty training him in November, and 5.5 months later, he's still not potty trained. His schedule at the card center is every 1.5 hours, no accidents, but no manding. His schedule at home is every hour, and again, no manding. He is on a really strict diet. We tried food reinforcement, and now we have switched to the iPad. I have cut him off the iPad completely unless he goes potty as his reward. I know this is not normal. 5.5 months is too long. He is verbal. adorable and smart, but I don't know what the heck is going on. And she wrote, please, with like 5 E's, help.
Right. I'm not able to figure out exactly what's going on because I can't, from the email, because I can't tell if you are, if I'm, okay, so Jay, I have lots of questions. I can't tell if the iPad's being used for manding or it's just being used for reinforcer, or it's being used for both, which shouldn't be the case. I can't tell if he's already mastered it on a schedule. Why is there a different schedule at home than there is at the center? And I can't figure out why we are going for manding already unless he's completely fluent with the schedule. So I'd have a lot of questions. So here's what I suggest that we do. I don't know what office you're in, but I would ask you to write to your supervisor and say that you had some communication with me. And whenever we have an issue like this, we have a system in place where, so we have several senior people whose job it is to oversee all of the cases to make sure that everybody's doing everything right, so we catch things like this. So our ARG group, our Autism Research Group, which is PhDs in autism who in ABA who are fabulous, like Jonathan Tarbox, who you've had on this show, have somehow automatically turned into our toilet training experts. I feel bad for them. They've published on this numerous times, obviously, but I think that they were telling me that a lot of supervisors who have issues with potty training turn to them.
Yeah.
So all you have to do is you have to tell your supervisor, see, every case, every single child at CARD, we automatically will take a couple of hours of your child's funding and give it to a senior supervisor, someone who is higher level trained, PhD level trained, has been at CARD for a very long time and has seen hundreds of kids.
Rock stars.
And so all you have to do is you have to tell your supervisor, feel free at any time to CC me on the email, by the way. My email is doreen@centerforautism.com. I love to hear from our parents. Just email your supervisor and say, I talked to Doreen and we need some guidance on the potty training protocol, and could you please use corporate hours, that's what it's called, corporate hours, with ARG or whoever, QA, one of our senior groups, to make sure we're doing everything fine with the toilet training. And that's all. And then somebody who's a rock star, as Shannon said, will oversee the case and make sure you get through the potty training. Don't worry about 5.5 months. That's not a big deal. Your child just started 6 months ago. It's unusual that we would start potty training within the first month of compliance. So, but it's not a big deal. We will get through it.
And I appreciate you saying that, because that's the thing that I was thinking, sitting at this point in my life with my child, if I could do one thing over again, I would go back and stop worrying.
I
would just have a worry-ectomy.
Yeah.
I would pull it out and say, I'm on this ride, and I'm going to do this to the fullest, and I'm going to commit to this, and I'm going to let the worry be someplace else.
Absolutely.
Give it to me. Give it to the teddy bear in the corner.
Right.
Give the worry to somebody else, because here's the one thing that I know for you: your child is going to be potty trained. I don't know whether it's going to be next week or next month or further down the road, but it's going to happen.
Right.
And you worrying about it won't help it happen faster.
That's true. I'm glad you're saying that, Shannon, because I have had some children who are just severely affected by autism, and we get them through potty training. Yep. So, there's no use in worrying about it. Just keep with it. It'll happen.
And you're my kind of mom, because I used to say that worry was not just my part-time habit, it was my full-time job.
Yeah.
I still participate in it, and I need somebody to tell me, stop worrying.
Absolutely. I mean, how can you stop worrying? It's our kids.
Right. And from time to time, I will sing the little Doris Day, Que Sera, Sera song and remind myself, nothing bad is happening right now. Because if anything bad were happening right now, I wouldn't have time to talk to you about it.
That's true.
Right? So nothing bad is happening right now. You're just on the ride. And there will come a day when you will write and say, my child is potty trained. And then you'll be on to the next thing.
Right.
You will. There will be another thing.
That's such a good way to put it, really, yeah.
So take a breath.
Yeah.
And have that faith and have that trust that it is going to happen. You're going to take action, though, to make sure that it happens in the most timely fashion that it can, as Dr. Granpeesheh shared. But it will be okay.
Yes.
And it is one of those great things that once you have potty trained your child, then I do think it's one of the biggest milestones for our parents.
I know it is, and we don't realize it, but it's so difficult. I know, and once
your life changes.
It really does. It really does, and it's not even. I mean, I don't know what this parent has experienced or what you experienced, but I have to tell you, some of the cases that I've worked with, I mean, it is. You know, it wasn't just the child not being potty trained, but the child was feces smearing and, on purpose having potty accidents to get attention and all sorts of stuff. And I think it is really life-changing for parents when this is under control.
Oh, everybody has gone through it at some point, that potty training with every child on the spectrum. The thing that I remember, I have a friend who has 3 boys, and my son is just between her youngest and her middle one, and I remember being in the parking lot of a McDonald's, and we had 3 children who had accidents, and we were in the parking lot with the back of her van open, wiping up all manner of things. Crazy. Right? With 13 changes of clothes between her car and my car. And when we were past that phase and no longer had to do that, the freedom with which you move about the cabin is crazy good.
Absolutely.
You're not packing things, there's not the worry, you get to go be someplace, play with other kids and not have to worry about it. It will happen.
Yes.
It will happen. You have it coming to you, we've ordered it. Follow up and then sit back and be patient. Okay. Also want to know, people talk about 1-to-1 aide at school. Are those hours counted within the 40 hours of ABA or separate from the 40 hours?
They're counted as part of, but as long as they're good. So. It's if it's a card program, we would be doing a lot of the hours at home initially, and then once the child is school age and we basically have no other option but to go into school, we will go into school. And so the team is all one. So I have my own people in school who are being shadows and then being, after a while, unknown shadows for the child. And then, yes, it counts. Because if you think about it, the child's time in school increases, right? So when we first integrate into school, we're just doing something probably like 3 days a week, 3 hours each day, 9 hours, and that's that. But by the time they're in, let's say, kindergarten or first grade, we're generally up to about 25 hours at least, or 30 even. And so what I will tend to do and hope to do is that by the time the child's in first grade, I don't think they need my aide there the whole time. But they probably do need the aide there 15 to 20 hours. And so about 15 to 20 hours of the program is at school and the rest is at home, adding up to about 40 hours. And every child is different, so you could have a child who needs more support in school, less at home, or the other way around. But the home aspect generally keeps going because that's where we're actually doing the teaching. Mm-hmm. And the school aspect is where we're doing a lot of the generalization and teaching the child to use those skills with their peers. So yes, it does. But then when schools offer an aide, I don't really like to count it in the 40 hours unless the aide is very well trained, so trained by your agency and attends all the meetings, all the clinics, really knows what they're doing. Otherwise, having someone stand there and just make sure the child doesn't get into trouble, that's not counted.
Yeah. Okay, really important. All right, we're going to take one last break and come back with Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh. Stick with us. Welcome back to Autism Live and to Ask Dr. Doreen. We have Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh here with us, and she's answering your questions. Okay, we had a question that I don't fully understand, but part of it I do understand. A viewer wrote in and said, do you have any information on it says BLK water. I don't know what that is, and if it helps children with ASD. If so, in what way does it help? I don't know what that is, but we'll do some research on that. But the second part of her question: do you have any information on whether or not sign language helps to increase a child's ability to communicate and ultimately speak? My son doesn't have verbal language, however, he uses PECS and different forms of expressive language. And then she's given us an email. That's how I know that it's she. And she said, thank you for your help. And we will email the link to what Dr. Granpeesheh has to say. So the question is whether or not sign language helps to increase a child's ability to communicate and ultimately speak. And her son does not have verbal language, but he does use PECS and different forms of expressive language.
Right. And also with the BLK water, I guess it's the water that has some deal going with Generation Rescue. Right now it's alkalized water, but I don't know enough about it at all. Alkalized water generally increases hydration more than regular water, but that's all I know. Sign language, of course, is a form of communication. It's a little bit harder than PECS. When you take an exam, for example, a final exam of some sort, and you have recall questions where you have to generate all the answer out of your head, versus multiple choice questions where you have some choices and you pick one. And multiple choice is much easier because it's visually in front of you and it helps you remember, versus recall. And that's the difference between PECS and sign language. Sign language is something you have to recall, all the shapes and so on, because it's not right in front of you. But PECS is in front of you, and it's a reminder, so it's a lot easier to grasp. So that's one aspect of it. Generally speaking, I would say if your child's already doing PECS, stay with PECS. Definitely stay with it, because you have a ton of options with PECS. You will go to, from the PECS program, you can actually start to the child will start to see icons, obviously, that represent things, and then the icon, we generally pair the icons with words under them, and before you know it, your child has memorized the look of those words, and before you know it, then your child can actually start using an iconic system on an iPad, and they can actually start to learn to type words, and that's a really good way of communicating, much better than sign language. Sign language, you have to realize the receiver has to understand sign as well. So you're limiting your child's communication abilities. PECS is, in my mind, much better. Good job, Andy Bondi, many years ago. Fabulous thing that he did. So in any case, I think that you should stay with that and you should pursue that, because, and that's another thing, people don't realize how far you can actually go with a iconic system. You really can. So make sure you know someone, you have someone helping you who's familiar with all the different levels of PECS.
I have to say that when I started doing this show, I hadn't been exposed to a lot of older adults on the spectrum who were using assistive technology. And now I go to events, and it's been an education, and heaven knows I need more education.
It's pretty
because
cool.
I'm a little bit remedial in terms of
technology,
well, and understanding how that communication works. But it's fascinating to me, how an adult on the spectrum, how quick they are and how it speaks to me, and how much of a conversation we can have once they educate me about how they're going to talk to me. It's really cool,
amazing.
It's incredibly cool, and it creates so much hope. Because they're able, and the parents who are usually there with that individual talk about how much it opened up all of their worlds, so that they could have the I was talking earlier about wanting to have that conversation with my child. This allows them to have that conversation with their child. And we have seen in the last year that there have been studies that have shown that with our younger kids, that they're taking time getting functional communication, that they're more likely to get to verbal speech having used something like that. It doesn't, I think a lot of times parents think, if I do PECS,
then they won't talk.
They'll never talk. And we see that science has shown us that just isn't the case.
Right, and thank you for bringing that up, because that was part of the question.
Yes.
And I think it is important to say that often we use these iconic or nonverbal formats to enhance or to get the child actually to start talking. So it sort of acts as a prompt. So don't think that teaching a nonverbal communication system will slow down the verbal. That's not true. All you have to do is to make sure that at some points you pair the two and require the verbal. If you require the verbal, then the visual just becomes a prompt. It's helping your child.
Really remarkable. Good stuff. Okay, the next question we have, my daughter is sound sensitive. She can't bear the sound of the washing that the washing machine makes. I have to do laundry while she's at school, and now I'm going back to work. Help, or I may have no way to do laundry. You know, when we think about sometimes how we cope and how that informs the rest of our lives, and then one thing changes.
Right.
You know, bless this mom, because her child has been reacting to the washing machine, so what she found to do was, I'll do it while she's at school.
Yeah.
But now she's going to go to work, and her biggest fear is, how am I going to be able to do laundry? It really brings home how debilitating these things can be if we don't deal with them.
I know, and it's just, for those of us who don't live with it day in and day out, and as many children as I've been with and lived with and had them grow up in my care, it's a different experience when you think about things like this. I have a couple of comments. The number one thing is, buy some Bose headphones. First of all, please buy some sound reduction or soundproof headphones. And the reason I say this is not because, you know, it's a simple solution, because the reason I say it is because I'm worried that if your child is that reactive to the sound of the laundry machine, imagine how many other sounds are also bothering her. And it would be very, very life-changing for her to have the ability to take these headphones, put them on. You don't even have to have music attached to it. You just have them on, and they cut down ambient noise. It is so comforting to some of our kids to have that. So please do that. That is really going to help her a lot.
And they actually call those headphones noise canceling and sound canceling, which if you think about it, just the idea of that for your child, canceling some of the sensory,
it's amazing how they work. And so that's not, you know, that's the very first thing. The second thing, though, is that you really, goes into that deeper conversation of how far do we want to change our kids?
Yeah.
And so the issue is, you know, I always have this discussion with people when they say they're offended by our attempts to bring anyone out of autism, and it becomes offensive, and why not just accept us the way we are? And what I'm about to say has to do with that, because, see, this is a good scenario, this is a good example of how it can be extremely uncomfortable for the person with autism as well as for family members when some very benign environmental factor has such a severe reaction, causes such a severe reaction. So laundry machine, it's not like the loudest thing, obviously, it's, you know, not that noisy, but it causes enough of a disruption to your child that you need to now modify your schedule in order for your child not to be disturbed by it, and so on and so forth. And that's the whole thing. My point is we can modify the environment to some extent. In other words, you're going to get the Bose sound noise canceling headphones, and they will help. But there are still going to be scenarios where your child may not have them, like for instance in class, where your child, or it's unexpected, where you're in a car and there's like a jackhammer or something, and you have to also at the same time, while you're modifying the environment to fit the child, you also have to help the child figure out ways to cope with what's in the natural environment. So, you know, after you've dealt with this, and when you have a little bit more time, or perhaps if your child has a behaviorist who's working with them, it would be important to shape the child's hearing. And you can actually shape your hearing, believe it or not. You know, if you're used to listening to, let's say, a low volume of classical music, and once you have children, you will gradually become shaped to a high volume of Metallica. You know, you can, your hearing does get shaped. So you can gradually expose your child to similar sounds and get them used to the sound of the washing machine so that it doesn't bother the child that much anymore. So a fast answer, a fast solution, and then the more longer term solution would be to shape it up.
Okay, really remarkable. As you were talking, because last week we talked about a viewer who wrote in and said that they were offended by some of the language that we were using on the show, and you had something that you asked her some questions, and she did write back.
Okay.
You asked her specifically, are there things that you have difficulty with that you wish you had some help for? Are there things that you would like to improve on? And I don't want to share, because we have had several email communications back and forth, she and I, and some of it is on the more personal side, but I do want to share with you and to share with the audience that she wrote back and said that yes, she does struggle with some things, and that there are some things that she would like to do better, and that she also disclosed that not only was she diagnosed with autism, but she has a young daughter who has now been diagnosed with autism, and she has a cousin, and they're all in different places on the spectrum, and that she is able to see all the different areas, and that each one of them needs support in different areas.
Definitely.
One of the things that she said she wishes that she had help with is not having anyone to talk to, not knowing what to do about certain things, and she most specifically said, I cannot organize. I only go in a store once a month, and I have a terrible time organizing things for the most part. I really wish I could get my daughter some kind of friend, but because it's hard for her to make a friend, it is now hard for her daughter to have a friend. So I wanted to share that she, and she's been writing, and we've been talking about different things, but I really appreciated her having the courage to say, hey, I'm offended when you say this.
Yes, absolutely. And then continuing the dialogue in this way. Yeah, that's wonderful. We all have things that we would like to improve.
Yes.
All of us, we all do, or need help on. I just real quickly, we're running out of time. I just wanted to say that, we do have a really fabulous set of programs for organization and planning. If you are in correspondence, Shannon, please guide her to the executive functioning areas. The planning and organization stuff on there is pretty good. It really does help you, like going to the store and so on. There's some activities that you could just write down that would really help organize you. In general, writing down is a very good way to organize your thoughts. In terms of friends, the one quick thing I want to say, and we do have programs for friendship and just increasing play and social activity and so on. But one of the things I want to say is don't worry about your daughter as much as, things have changed a lot since you were a child, and it's a different world, and it's a world that is much more accepting of differences as a whole, whether they're ASD or other types of issues, but also as you can see, I mean, it's you and your daughter and your cousin and so on. And by the time your daughter is growing up, like over the next 5 or 10 years, the way things are going right now, we all will have friends on the ASD spectrum. We all will know people, and there will be different friendships. Their friendships now are different. Most of our kids' friendships are, I can see my 12-year-old's friendships and are 100% different than my 18-year-olds were 6 years ago. The world is much more, technical and on the phone and all that sort of stuff. So just giving you some view not to worry about your daughter, and please reach out to us if we can help in any way.
And we're in talks, which is a good thing, because I'm learning about what is offensive and why it's offensive, and finding the right words, because I never want to offend anybody. I don't think anybody who ever comes in the studio ever. That's never the intent. We want to hook you up with the resources, and if words that I use prevent that, then I want to stop that. So, but I appreciate all the things that you've been writing in, and wonderful to hear, and the honesty of her saying, yeah, there are things that I struggle with. Wonderful. Really remarkable.